Welcome to GermiNation, the podcast where seeds tell their stories. I'm your host, Cindy Hicks, coming to you from the Iowa State University Seed Science Center, a global leader in seed research, education, and outreach. Each episode, we dig into the beauty, wonder, and science of seeds, those tiny little powerhouses at the heart of agriculture, biodiversity, and global food security. Through conversations with scientists, farmers, industry leaders, and change makers around the world, we explore how seeds connect us, sustain us, and shape our future. This is GermiNation, where every great story starts with a seed.
Hey, little seed. What do you need to help you grow?
Today on GermiNation, we're exploring one of the most innovative approaches in modern crop production, relay cropping. Researchers at Iowa State University are studying how farmers can maximize productivity by growing multiple crops in the same season while improving soil health and creating new revenue streams. We're coming to you live from the Iowa State University Sorensen Farms, where researchers are holding a field day to show off their relay crops, which include sunflower, soybean, wheat, canola, and camelina. We start with Dr. Nabby. He is a researcher from Iowa State University. He works in the Seed Science Center and the Plant Pathology Department. Welcome to GermiNation, Dr. Nabby.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about relay crops. What exactly is relay cropping?
Relay cropping has two layers. One is the one we plant before will be harvested first, followed by we are going to plant the second one. For example, winter cereal rye we plant in late fall, like October, November. Winter cereal rye comes up in early spring. As soon as it comes up, we plant soybean in the same field in early spring. That's kind of relay cropping. There is a difference between relay cropping and intercropping. Intercropping is we plant two cultivars together. Here, one cultivar is planted early, followed by the second cultivar.
Why are researchers excited about this system?
This has kind of multiple benefits. Number one, benefits of relay cropping soybean with cereals and oilseeds has multiple benefits. Like the one, you can get a lot of biomass. It also minimizes weed infestation in the field. It also reduces soil erosion. And you also have additional income. Just growing soybean, you have one income. If you grow two crops in the same piece of land, you get two incomes.
What problems does it solve for farmers?
This would really help farmers minimize weed infestation, minimize herbicide spray in their field. It also helps reduce soybean cyst nematode populations in the soil. That's first year study we have so far.
So can you tell me a little bit about this event that you're holding here today?
This event was organized by Iowa Soybean Research Center. The PI, Silvina, and co-PI, Leandro. The director of this funding agency is Mark Leach in agronomy. He's the director now. The main objective was to convey the message to the grower, industries, farming communities, so that what we are doing, let them learn from the system we have. Field size is really huge. Earlier, we used to have 10 feet by 15 feet plot sizes. Now we have 12.5 feet wide by 300 feet long. Like we have like 24 strips here. It's a huge exercise. We are trying to convey the message. If it fits into their system, let them adopt our technology.
Well, and we are literally out in the field today.
Yes.
Literally out in the field. How many people registered for this event?
So far, 40 plus people have registered. I'm expecting 10 plus from the farm crew, agronomy research farm and other research farms. And we also have sponsors, guests coming in very soon. The company that is sponsoring meals, drinks, everything is by the local company in Ames.
So what do you expect people to take away from today's event?
We are trying to have good interaction with the growers, industry personnel, and companies. Show them what we are doing. If we have any limitations in our exercise that we are trying to convey to the industry personnel and farmers. We also try to learn from them.
Thank you for taking time to talk to me.
Thank you very much.
Next on Germination, we hear from Jason Russell, owner of Big Boulder Farms and a sixth-generation farmer whose family has been rooted in agriculture for more than 100 years. Jason was a featured speaker at the Iowa State University Relay Cropping Field Day, where he shared how his family farm has successfully integrated relay cropping as a conservation practice to improve sustainability and productivity. You'll hear his field day presentation as he discusses the opportunities, challenges, and lessons learned from implementing relay cropping in his operation. You'll hear from him next, after a short break.
Strong seed systems start with strong leaders. Hi, I'm Lori, Program Coordinator for Iowa State University's Seed Technology and Business Graduate Program. Our program equips professionals with the technical and business knowledge needed to lead in the seed industry. The program is online, flexible, and industry-focused. Apply today.
Welcome back to Germination, the podcast where every great story starts with a seed. We head back out to the Relay Cropping Field Day to hear from Jason Russell about his experience with relay cropping on his farm near Monticello, Iowa.
My name's Jason Russell. I farm 2 hours that way near a town called Monticello. And we kind of farm near the driftless region. Some people know what that is, some don't. So we've got a lot of different soil types and a lot of rocks to pick up. On our farm, we primarily raise livestock. It's more than half of our farm's work and revenue every year. We custom feed hogs for another farmer, and we have a cow-calf and a direct-to-market beef business too. We don't get too carried away. We just basically take animals to locker and sell halves and quarters that way to people that want locally grown beef. So let's just go back, say, 15, 20 years ago. I was growing corn, soybeans, farming with my brother, and we were using hog manure as fertilizer. And we were just noticing that it didn't add up in some cases. And, you know, you'd analyze the manure and you'd put it on in the fall like the agronomist told you. And then we would plant our corn, and the corn would get yellow if you got a lot of rain. And I just didn't like that. And then the other thing I didn't like is growing soybeans would cause erosion and it'd hurt your organic matter. So I'm like, gosh, you know, there's probably something we could do to change that. And what's that going to be? So I kind of started out with winter wheat and cereal rye as cover crops. Spent a great deal of time working with those, figuring out how to seed them, and learned a lot with that, and how to deal with the agronomic side with herbicides and timing. And I learned that cereal rye is probably the best for our area just because you get the cool weather growth. You get so much more biomass out of it. And I do a little bit of winter wheat here and there, but I just don't like that it isn't really working that hard for me. So I've been sticking with cereal rye on 100% of my acres. And I'm really happy because, you know, you hear about heavy rain, flood watch, all this stuff. Every farmer kind of cringes a little bit. I'm like, bring it on, you know? So I'm fine. I've got cover crops out there. It looks like somebody put straw in between the rows of the cornfield. It's fantastic. And, you know, I've heard somebody say, well, how much rain did you get? Well, I say all of it. And they're like, why? Because it didn't run off. It all soaked in. So, you know, and then relay cropping is related to that because in reality, you're getting all the benefits of having cover crops plus because you're letting that cereal grow to its full maturity. And then it's producing a high lignin armor that after you harvest that cereal rye, it's going to go down on the soil and it's going to prevent those soybean fields, no matter how hilly they are or anything else, from eroding. They really are going to have a hard time eroding. So that's been my biggest dislike for growing soybeans is they're kind of hard on the soil. And some people think they're great because they put nitrogen in the soil, but in all reality, if you don't have a grass growing when the soybeans die, that boost of nitrogen will basically give your soil diarrhea is what it'll do. The nitrogen will be consumed by the microbes. They'll attack all the carbon, and then you got nitrate going in the tile. Or, you know, at the very least, you don't have any residue out there because the biology consumed it all. So relay cropping with the cereal and the soybeans kind of prevents that. It puts a lot more carbon for those microbes to consume, prevents that diarrhea effect and the loss of that nitrate, keeps it in the field, keeps it out of the water. Everybody talks about that. So how did I get into it? It was like peer pressure. I was just telling Matt about it. So I have a friend that's kind of been doing it for, I'd say, 15 years, and up in West Union, Lauren Steinlage, and I've been talking to him about it. I had some interest in it. Didn't know kind of how to start, and he just told me it's not a big mistake if it's not big acreage. So, you kind of tell yourself that, and it kind of opens your mind up to what you can try. So we started out small, and I had some people that are right in my locale that had been studying it, and I started out with just a strip of it, and then, the next year I did a 40-acre field with every other 60 feet was relay and then conventional, just to see. I'm always interested in what the realities are. There's a lot of anecdotal research that people do, and, they don't be scientific enough, and they might just be hurting themselves in the long run by doing this, and I don't like that. So yeah, we've been doing it. We didn't do it this year. Anytime I try something on a large scale, I do it for 5 years, and we're kind of switching gears. We're moving our resources to a new project for the next 5 years. We're going to grow our cereal rye seed, and then we're going to harvest the straw. Then we're going to plant summer forage, and then we're going to graze cattle, intense rotational grazing. We got enough cattle to do it now, and my kids are old enough to help, so that's the next big thing, I guess. So I do have a lot of good experience and some bad experience with relay cropping. It really just comes down to the weather. You've got very small windows to put everything together, and either you got to have a small enough area you can kind of get it done quick, or you got a lot of machinery. Either one would probably work. So, and generally what we do is where we first harvest corn, whether it be for silage or for grain, that's where our relay field's going to go. So you got to think a year ahead. And what corn am I going to plant where that'll be the first corn I harvest, because that's where I want my relay to be. So you got to really think farther ahead. To be successful with the cereal grain yield, you need to get that planted end of September, beginning of October. That's probably the latest I would go. And then be cognizant of the planting date. The earlier you plant cereal rye or wheat, the more tillering you'll have in the spring. So then you're gonna have an issue where, well, I planted September 15th, look at me, and I planted it really thick, and then, the next spring you're like, oh my gosh, the soybeans are all suffering because I have a tremendously good stand of cereal grain now, and I don't really want that in a relay. So we've been kind of selling on a 50 pounds the first October. Knock it down if you're going earlier, add to it if you're going later on the cereal rye seeding. And that's been working really good. There's no wrong way to do it. I gotta tell everybody that. So some people will intercrop it, I call it, where they leave an unseeded area to plant the soybeans in. Some people will drill the rye and drill the beans. Some people will drill the beans and plant the rye in rows. There's really no wrong way to do it. The way I did it was we would drill the rye in the fall with an 8-inch double disc no-till drill into the cornfield after harvest. And then we would plant at a 5-degree angle to the intended soybean rows. And then in the spring, we would plant the soybean rows in between the old corn rows straight. So then we would have a good stand of soybeans. We usually plant about 100,000. That's kind of what we've settled on. If you think you're doing a great job of planting, 100,000 is plenty. And then we just wait. We would plant the beans normal time, end of April, beginning of May, whatever you think is a good time to plant beans. And we just wait. And then the first week of July, you go out and you combine that cereal grain over top of the soybeans. Hopefully not damage the soybeans. Some years are better than others as far as how that goes, but we use a combine with narrow tires on it so we don't drive on the soybeans and smash them down. And then usually the day after or so, we get out there and we spray like Liberty or Liberty Enlist. You got to kind of watch your flowers. If there's a lot of flowers on those plants, you're actually off label on Enlist. So you could actually hurt your bean yield spraying 2,4-D on them. That's why I like Liberty. It just doesn't seem to have the deleterious effect on those later sprays on soybeans. But really what we saw on our best year was like a 10 to 12% reduction in soybean yield versus conventional non-relay. And, we had 70 bushel beans and 30 bushel rye and 1 shot of Liberty. That was hard, so you got more grain and less herbicide. That's fantastic. And that's what I call win-win best case scenario. Last year I thought we were going to have our best year ever, and then we had 80-mile-an-hour winds like 2 days before we were going to harvest cereal rye, and it kind of put a damper on our plans, but it was still successful. It wasn't super profitable, but it was still successful. When we look at the grand scheme of things, you're doing a lot more for the soil. So what's that worth? I have no idea. It's definitely worth something. We do notice a small bump in corn yield, 5 to 15 bushels the next year. And where I've done that, like I said, I did that relay trial, and I encourage everybody that is going to try it to do that. Pay attention to the subsequent crops, how they behave. You could see it on the yield monitor the next year in color. It was significant, the improvement in the corn yield. And why did it do that? I don't know. There's a lot going on below the soil we don't understand. It's something to do with that, I'm guessing. So probably the fact that we captured every bit of nitrogen that was produced by those soybeans and kept it, and it didn't get lost because all our residue from the relay cropping. And a lot of people are concerned. They see all that straw with beans growing in it, standing up, and they're like, how do you combine that? I was like, I don't know. Other than it looks different, it doesn't combine any different. I don't have any issues, so just go with it. It goes well. And I would say if you are going to do relay cropping with cereals, harvest that grain early, like 18, 20% moisture, because the weather and the climate we have here this time of year, it's obviously humid today. You're just not getting any dry down. And the longer you wait for that field to senesce and ripen in that field and get drier, the bigger those beans get. And they grow really fast. And if you can get out there and get that rye at 20%, you might buy yourself a week with those soybeans being shorter. And that could be the difference between having a great bean yield and a terrible bean yield. Letting them grow that week. So like I said, you either got to have a lot of equipment or small acreage to make it really successful. So anybody have a question? Yep. Yeah, he asked, what do I do with the cereal rye? I have a bin with a floor in it that I use for my wet holding bin for my dry corn. And if it's not empty this time of year, you probably did something wrong marketing wise. So I always just have that empty, and then it's got a big fan in it, and we'll put the rye in there and blow air on it to cool it off. And when it's 85 degrees out, things dry pretty fast. Biggest thing is don't put it on the truck in the field and then wait till the next morning, because you're probably going to kill the germ in that rye. It's going to get hot. You do not want to do that. It's like you got everything set up for that combine rolls, and you kind of like they do with seed corn, very timely. It's wet. Get it processed, get it over with right away, put it right in the dryer. So, and our germs come back in the 80s always with cereal rye, and a lot of folks don't take that seriously. They don't understand that seed is alive and you need to treat it very carefully and get it cooled off, get it dry. And then we'll usually let it sit in that bin for a couple weeks, and then we'll take it to a custom cleaner, and I just take the truck over there a load at a time, and then he cleans it, dumps it back on my truck. Then I've got a hopper bottom bin that I'll pull seed out of. We just put it in that, take it out one bin, put it in the other until we're done, and it's real slick. We do. Depending on the year, I'm probably selling the majority of it. If you don't have as great a yield, you're not gonna have enough for yourself if you sell the same amount you did the year before. But yeah, generally I'm selling the majority of it. This year the rye looks great, but we don't want to count our chickens until we get it harvested. But there's a demand for it. And last year there's a ton of people grew it, and they were all like trying to undercut each other on Facebook Marketplace. Is driving me nuts, because people are like, what do you want for your rye? I said 12. And they're like, okay, well, this guy's selling it for 11. I said, go for it. And then they came to me and they're like, why didn't my rye grow? I said, I don't know. I know mine will grow. And there's a lot of that going on. So I don't know if people are going to keep up the undercutting thing, but I saw some at 9, you know what I mean? And it might have been great rye. I don't know, but it's kind of ridiculous. Like, we're doing this to make money, guys. And everybody ran out. So I don't know. It was one of them deals. And then you can get cereal rye from the northern plains pretty reasonable, and you just got to freight it in. A lot of guys do that, but I'm kind of a believer in epigenetics. I don't know if you know what that is. Like, you keep replanting the same thing over and over, and then you get a microbiome thing going, and you're trying to keep going for that, I guess. And that's why I keep saving my own seed replant. But yeah, go ahead. Nope. No, I plant when the rye is anywhere from knee high to waist high, or sometimes smaller when I plant soybeans. Really depending on the year you have and how well that rye grew and how big it's going to be. Generally, when that cereal grain is green, that ground is just like where I'm standing. It's soft. It's really soft. As soon as you kill it, spray it, mow it, roll it, whatever, that ground gets hard as cement. And you're going to have probably hydraulic down pressure to get that planted and slow the heck down. Biggest thing I tell people is the faster you go, the more down pressure you need. And if you just slow down, any planter will plant it, but you might be going really slow if you don't have that specialized down pressure. So, but I think I was planting 5 miles per hour. And big thing with beans is they're not going as deep as corn, so you don't have to push it in as far. So, yeah. Yep. Go ahead. Yep. So we'll just start at harvest time. We'll harvest our corn. We'll go out with the grain drill and plant 8-inch rows of rye at a 5-degree angle. And then I have RTK on my planter tractor. So I go in there and I just shift 15 inches off of my previous year's corn planting, and I plant my beans. And then when I'm out there driving with the combine, I'm driving on the old corn rows and not running over the beans. And a lot of people are like, oh, do you do that with RTK? Well, no, you can see the beans because you're up high looking down, piece of cake. You know, you can see where the middle of the sickle is. You put it in between the rows and you just go. Yep. Yeah. Anybody else? Some people put rollers on the sickle to protect the beans. If we were doing more of it, I would probably go that way. Otherwise, it's just kind of like an art to it, you know, with the tilt and the manual. You want to lock your header rigid. Some people don't understand that if they've never cut small greens. You don't want it to be set to float because you'll hit a bump and it'll be like, it'll just like gouge in the beans, and that's no fun. So you want to be locked rigid. Bigger heads are fine as long as you've got the capability to tilt it and follow the ground. Some people are doing the drag rod thing where you install a separate sensor for that head, then the combine can control it, and that actually works pretty good. But you've got to fool with it and get it calibrated right. You know, most of the time the beans are all the same height. They're kind of tall and gangly looking in there. But the reality is once you take that cereal rye off and all those resources open up, they really do well. The other thing I would mention is planting a lot later bean than you generally do. And some people are scared of that. They're like, I'm going to be harvesting beans late. It's like, well, the reality is you got to do some field blast. Just make this one and plant a later bean. Because when you combine, if you nick those beans, they got to have time to recover from it and make more nodes to make more pots. So, yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Sveni.
What do you think about the people around Northeast Iowa are willing to implement relay cropping?
Yeah, I just talked to a gentleman yesterday that's going to try it with wheat. He's not real hopeful it's going to work because wheat's pretty short. And I did a little bit of wheat last year too. You were at my field day, you saw it. And the beans are basically at the top of the wheat. And to get any of the wheat, you had to give the beans a haircut, and it was not great. I think that we need to develop markets for cereal rye or maybe barley or triticale or something a little taller than the wheat, and see if we can see if we can get more adoption that way and have a greater good thing with more soil protection and diversity and pest resistance. And, because right now we got a corn soybean oscillation, I call it. It's not even a rotation, really, because the rootworms figured that out. They just wait until corn comes back and then they hatch. So, it's frustrating with that. And there's a tremendous amount of we can spray for that thought process out there, and we need to kind of get away from that. I had a couple of people tell me, "Wow, your cover crop looks great. You should put an insecticide on when you spray your cover crop to kill it." I'm like, "Well, we're scouting. We're not seeing anything." And they told me I was nuts, and so I got the insecticide, and I had it sitting in the shed. I'm like, well, if we see something, we'll deal with it. We never saw anything. We saw a bazillion cutworm and armyworm moths flying earlier this spring. We were like, oh, this is going to be a bad year. They all got froze. We had them cold mornings, killed them. We don't have anything. We didn't spray. We don't have anything. One thing we do have is a ton of millipedes out there sawing up all that cereal rye that's dead, turning it into plant material or plant fertilizer. And if we would have sprayed and killed all them, we wouldn't have that. So, you got to try and work with nature, integrate pest management as much as you can. And there's a lot of benefits to it. So, especially when you're relay and you don't have near the chemical bill. Go ahead.
Is there anything you would change if you were harvesting the cereal rye for biomass rather than seed?
Well, you can't do that in relay cropping because you would remove the soybeans also. Because the cereal rye, the heads are like right there. The heads are up high, sometimes 3 feet off the ground, and you can get the grain. You could potentially put a catcher on the back of the combine, catch all the biomass that you did bring in other than the grain. We do harvest rye without soybeans in it for biomass and sell it to the highway erosion control people, and they throw it in the road ditch. I think maybe I'd plant a little thicker, because when you're relay cropping, you do not want to be too thick. You'll have a resource concern. Those soybeans will just die of thirst because they're not deeply rooted like the rye is. So, because those soybeans have to have enough water to germinate. They really don't need that water until they get bigger, and they need like a ton of water when they're setting pods and filling pods. Very little when they're growing early. So that's why it works. You're taking advantage of more sunlight, better use of the land. A lot of the land, 5-6 months of the year, there's nothing on it. And you're not feeding the soil microbes with sugar. You're not doing anything when there's nothing growing out there. So, yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So good example in relay cropping. I like to, after you consider harvest, trucking, and cleaning, I like to net $10 a bushel. So if you get 30 bushel, that's $300 net income. And my seed cost is negligible. My chemical cost is zero, and I don't put any fertilizer on because it makes it fall over. So you take $300 an acre. How many soybeans would that be? How much soybean yield can you give up? That's up to you. Yep. Nope. We usually plant beans first, always. End April, beginning of May, whenever you think you're going to have success. I will say that we planted them like May 15th once because it was too wet, and it's still fine. The rye wasn't fully headed out, and it was kind of behind too. And I didn't feel good about it. I can show you pictures, but it was still a really good relay crop. The beans yielded 75 and the rye yielded 35. And I was driving over rye that was as tall as the front tire of the camper front tractor. So plant. That rye is really hard to kill unless it's pollinated. It's got yellow pollen showing or green on the heads. You can drive on and beat it all up, and that's a survivor. That's a good question. So there's got to be a cultural shift. I think we start there. People don't like untidiness, no-till cover crops. They just don't look tidy. People like to see clean-tilled fields because that's what everybody's kind of grown up seeing and done. And we need to kind of work on that first. I think everybody knows about this. I think we've done the outreach and the advertising, and the reality is it's like, don't knock it till you try it kind of a thing. I think maybe that's what we got to do. I have a lot of people that drive by and they just laugh at me, and then they come right in my combine. They're like, oh my God, I didn't think it, they have no idea until they see it. Are they going to try it? No, they're never going to try it. Their dad won't let them. So what do you do, Probably part of it is the control of the land is in stubborn hands. And the other part is anything, that is going to make them look different or stand out. They don't want that. And then maybe a little bit of people don't want cutting into their lake time. Get stuff done, get to the lake. So I don't have a lake house or anything because I've got livestock. So something that it's kind of stupid, but something that I think about having livestock for me and having cattle especially is if I have a failure, they'll eat it. So I grew chickpeas, I grew flax, I've grown a whole bunch of weird stuff. They'll eat it. Whether you bale it or you combine it, they're going to eat it. I've grown sorghum sedan, they'll eat it. They'll eat it. Wrap it in plastic when it's wet. I don't care what it is, they'll eat it. Lamb's quarter, giant ragweed, they'll eat it. So probably not as much for me because I hate losing money or just seeing things go to waste. Just disc it up. Ugh.
That wraps up part 1 of our special GermiNation series from the Iowa State University Relay Cropping Field Day. Today we heard firsthand from researchers and farmers who are exploring how relay cropping can improve soil health, increase land productivity, and create new opportunities for sustainable farming systems. But the conversation doesn't end here. In part 2, we'll take a closer look at camelina, an emerging oilseed crop that is generating excitement across the United States for its potential role in renewable fuels and sustainable agriculture. We'll also explore how sunflowers fit into relay cropping systems, the benefits they can bring to crop rotations, and what researchers are learning about managing these innovative production systems. And because agriculture continues to evolve with technology, we'll finish our field day coverage with a look at how drones are being used to monitor relay cropped fields, helping farmers and researchers gather valuable data from above. Join us for part 2 as we continue exploring the future of relay cropping and the innovations shaping the next generation of agriculture. Until then, thanks for listening to GermiNation, where every great story starts with a seed. Thank you for tuning in today. We'd like to give a special thank you to Let's Roll Snowball for allowing us to use the seed song. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out Let's Roll Snowball on YouTube for more fun and educational songs for children. GermiNation is a podcast produced by the Iowa State University Seed Science Center. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Iowa State University or the Seed Science Center. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Thank you for listening to GermiNation, where every great story starts with a seed.